May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable unto you, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer.
Amen.
This story of Jesus in his hometown synagogue is told in all three of the so-called synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And it is told differently in each one. In Matthew, we hear simply that coming into his native country, Jesus taught them in their synagogues in such a way as astonished them and caused them to say, "From where has this man received this wisdom and these powers? Is not this man the craftsman's son? Is not his mother called Mary, and his brothers James and Joseph and Simon and Judas? And are not all his sisters with us? From where, therefore, does this man receive all these things?" And they took offense at him. But Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not dishonored except in his native country and in his own household." And on account of their lack of faith, he did not perform many feats of power there. You notice no mention of the specifics of Jesus's teaching, certainly no mention of driving him out and trying to hurl him off a cliff. Mark has a similar account as to Matthew. And so we ask, at least I ask, how many of these details in Luke are historical and how many were added for narrative purposes by Luke? Or have, we all know the game of telephone, where when something gets passed from one person to another, it gets changed and added to. And we know that Luke was not a firsthand witness of any of the events of Jesus's life that he recounts. So what do we do with this story? Well, one of the dangers of reading these stories is, I'm sure many of us have experience of people that we know and love who get divorced. Maybe our parents, maybe our brothers or sisters or friends, maybe we ourselves, maybe our grandparents. And when there is a divorce in the family, people take sides. And if you listen to the two parties to the divorce and their account of what happened, they often are very different. And if you hear only one side, you might think you know what happened. You might pass that on to your children. But meanwhile, the people who hear the other side are passing on a different story. I think when we read the New Testament, and particularly when we read accounts of Jesus among his fellow Jews in Nazareth, we have to remember that much of the New Testament was written at a time when what we now know as Christianity and what we now know as Judaism were having a divorce. And tragically, some of the some of the anger that the Jewish followers of Jesus felt against their fellow Jews who were not following Jesus has been solidified, perpetuated in Christianity and in anti-Semitism. I mentioned this today in part because this week was Holocaust Memorial Day. And while the evil perpetrated against the Jews in Germany by the Nazis was uniquely horrific, the anti-Jewish sentiment that made that possible, that fostered it, predated Hitler by many generations, and alas, has not completely been eradicated from our culture. Hate crimes against Jews have been increasing. Just this week, we read about a school district that banned a graphic novel about the Holocaust from the library because it would be disturbing to the children. Well, yes, it would be disturbing to the children. It's dealing with a disturbing subject. There are many things in history that don't make us feel warm and fuzzy. So, alas, some Christian preachers have taken the story of Jesus and the synagogue in Nazareth and built on it these elaborate structures about why Jesus's compatriots were resentful and, no, that's way too slender a pedestal for elaborate structures of comparison of Jesus's theology to the theology of Judaism. We know that Jesus did not gain a lot of followers in his hometown of Nazareth. As a matter of geographic fact, we know that there is no cliff in the town of Nazareth. We don't know how much Luke has embroidered on the story. I think we need to read this in the context of our epistle and our collect. The epistle talks about love as the supreme virtue. If we do not read the story with love in our hearts towards Jesus's hometown people, we're not following Jesus. If we do not read this story and others like it with the goal of God's peace, we are not following Jesus. I commend to you a commentary on the Gospel of Luke by Ben Witherington III, who is a Christian theologian tending towards the evangelical end. He's at St. Andrew's University in Scotland. And Amy Jill Levine, who is University Professor of New Testament and Jewish Studies at Vanderbilt. And it's interesting reading two scholars' take on this story in Luke, and they don't agree. They don't agree on how much is historical and how much is added by Luke. They don't agree on Luke's motivations. But what they do agree on is that the two of them, Jewish scholar and Christian scholar, are trying to listen sympathetically to each other. They write that we see how we both came to our conclusions. We can locate the source of the disagreement, and in the conversation can read with more sensitivity in the presence of those with whom we disagree. They agree that there is no basis for broad generalizations or caricatures of Jews and their views of Jesus in this passage in Luke or later in the history. All of Jesus's first followers were Jews, and much, if not most, of the New Testament was written by Jews. Anti-Semitism is an ugly sin of which the church has all too often been guilty to this day in some cases. But anti-Semitism should not be laid at the doorstep of Luke. When you read the Gospels, read them with love. Read them with love towards those townsfolk of Jesus who were grappling with this transformation of the carpenter's son, who knew his brothers and sisters. Read them with love to Jesus's followers, seeing in him something unique and baffled that not everyone sees it that. And read them with the knowledge that God is like the parent whose children are getting divorced, who loves both, that the covenant with Jesus does not erase God's covenant with Abraham, but expands it. And that God's wish is that all of his children live with love towards him and towards one another, whether we agree or not.